it's sharp right now. So if we think of the second and third quarters of this year, the big downturn, part of that is China, but it's really most of the world. Maybe the U.S. is having a softer feel for it. And my concern is that it goes into next year. A lot of the factors are persistent. The inflation problem is one of them, low productivity. And for developing countries, this is a really harmful environment, especially as you look at their investment prospects out into the future. I think policy changes are really important, course corrections, in order to get more growth, more investment, more production going. That pulls down inflation.
Global central banks are coordinating these hikes like we haven't seen in a very long time, but that's because for a long time they were all coordinated bringing rates down. What needs to happen? You're somebody who's concerned about inflation. If you don't have banks raising rates, how do you handle that inflation?
We've been used to thinking of macro policies, fiscal and monetary, as being to stimulate demand or to slow, they call it tightening. But in many ways, fiscal and monetary policy have huge impact on output, on people's investment choices, on production. And so I think that's where the opportunity is going forward, to make a shift so that the whole world knows that your intention is to produce a lot more. So far, it's all been about restraint. We're going to try to stop the overheating of the economy. But on a global basis, there's not overheating. Lots of people are really already in a deep recession.
So you're talking about supply side, supply more rather than try and damp down the economic growth.
Yes, and the tools are there. The Fed has a lot of tools, and the fiscal side has a lot of tools to be aimed at producing more. I've made the point that the U.S. is the biggest economy, and so it's the one most able to add. If what you need to add is any measure of output, your biggest economy can do that. China, number two, can do that through policies that actually produce more.
But the policies that you've seen in the last year have been diametrically opposed to what you're talking about.
The policies are all aimed at restraint on demand.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, fiscally, we're not cutting regulations. We're not drilling more. We're not adding to supply. We're raising rates. We're not lowering rates, which allow people to start companies and invest with, in capital is more valuable. We're doing.
Yep.
Do you see promise in the UK? And the new prime minister there said that's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to raise corporate taxes. I'm going to get rid of a lot of the restraints on fracking and oil and gas. We're not seeing any of that here. And there won't be any till at least November, and maybe not till November of 2024.
Energy is a really important part of the problem, including in the UK. So if they can make some changes there, that'll help. Europe, is drawing in the natural gas from around the world. It's a critical part of the supply chain because of fertilizer and feeding into food, into yields. And so there needs to be changes there to produce a lot more energy. The 800 million people in the world don't have electricity at all.
No, right now.
So the focus there, and on the regulatory side, that's both fiscal and monetary. Turning to the Fed and other central banks, they have a lot of tools that can add to supply. They have the regulatory tool, and they're also right now they buy bonds. So think of where all the world's capital went over the last 10 years. It went into bond issuers, and that specifically is not the sector of the global economy that can add production. So there's got to be a change in that and say, look, our future monetary policy is going to be supportive of small business lending.